All right, here we go, guys. Welcome back. This is Alex here at Elevated Lifestyle Lab Podcast, bringing you another episode here during the midst of this coronavirus pandemic. It's weird times right now. I do hope everyone is staying healthy and safe out there. I do have a great guest for you guys today. His name is John Puritz. How we doing, John?
I'm good. Good.
Awesome, man. I ran across you through mutual friends of ours, Jimmy King, which I did my first podcast with. He told
Right.
me about you, that you had a podcast. He told me the name, and then we met a few times, and I got your book. I've read it. It's awesome, and I wanted to bring you on to talk about it because I feel like the topic itself, Man Up Already, me being in my mid-30s, small kids, it fits right into the timeline of my life.
Yeah.
You know, if you pick up the book and you read it, it's kind of a, if I don't relate to some of the stuff, but the whole picture of searching, to find what you're looking for, this book lays it out for you so you can understand it. So I wanted to bring you on to talk about it a little bit.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I
man.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your age group was what I had in mind when I was writing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was talking to me.
Good. Very good.
I really enjoy it. I mean, just diving into it at the beginning, I mean, especially with all this coronavirus stuff going on, I feel like it's a good book to read because I feel like a lot of people during this time were in isolation a lot. They were, either lost their jobs or it's just been a really weird time. And I feel like the book helps because it really puts it in perspective to get basically a foundation is where it all starts. You have your four pillars that you refer to.
Right.
And I feel like this is a great book for people that are really kind of lost right now or just don't have an idea of what to do next. And, I related to it because, a lot of us guys, we're hard-headed. We don't want to admit that. We need to man up. But I feel like if they could let down their guard a little bit, I feel like in all areas of your life, there's something that you can man up.
Right.
I mean, whether if you're doing good in the gym, but you're not doing good at work, or you're, vice versa, and all the way to the top. So I feel like it really speaks to volumes on any level, on religion, on family, on work, and I feel like you hit a lot of topics with everything you go about. What brought you to the point to finally feel like you manned up enough to write this Man Up Already book?
So, at 33, my wife and we had two small children. We gave everything up and moved from Connecticut down here to Florida. And all of my preparation before then was, drilled into my head was go to school, get good grades, get a good job. So having done that, and I talk about that obviously in the book, but, between the bachelor's degree and the master's degree and the grind and you're chasing success and you're doing all these things, what I found at the end of it in my young 30s was it was going to be 30 more years, and the story is, when Ethan, our second, came, 2 kids in daycare was like paying 2 mortgages.
Sure.
And everybody around us was doing the same thing. And I knew, I knew that if I did it for long, it'd kill me. It's like one of those moments where you're like, the stress will kill me.
Yeah.
So when you're in those extreme moments, you have to change. So we made the change. We came down here, and I knew I didn't want to go back into teaching like that. And I was just looking for my shot, and I ended up going into business and then doing that for 16 years. When I wrote the book, I think I was in business for probably 14 or 15. But, when you're an entrepreneur, you go through all the things that you go through. So at the end of it, now I wrote the book, I was 48. So at 48, I'm talking to somebody your age, and he's just kind of checked out. And I was like, from my perspective, I'm like, by the way, what's the language level? Right?
Anything goes.
Okay. So I wanted to grab him and go, dude, you need to man the fuck up. Like, what is your problem? I could not relate to what is your problem. And then I realized, no, this is a problem.
Sure.
And back when I was, 32, I write about it in the book, a pastor friend of mine gave me Wild at Heart. And that book changed my life. And the man problem is worse than it was when I was in my young 30s. So the book was kind of like, man, these things are universal. You've got to dig deep and you've got to pull through. You just
Sure.
can't check out. Nobody's coming to rescue you.
Sure. I'm sure you saw that a lot because in your business, you're basically coaching and leading people underneath you. So you're seeing a lot of the people around that age group. And that's kind of something that when we first met, I think you told that story. You were with, like you're saying, the late 20s, early 30s guy. And, just not really there. Just like you said, just checking out completely. And it reminded me back in my earlier 20s before I had like real responsibilities. It's like I was thinking on the way here. There's like man up already. I feel like I've manned up like several times throughout my life. Where you look back and you're like, oh, go to college, you kind of man up a little bit. And for me myself, I had to go through drug rehab and all this stuff. That was like the second phase, and then the 30s was the kids and the wife. And it's like you go through these monumental man up phases. And it really hit home when you were talking about the early kids because I could relate to like, oh, it's like, I could just make it off like some part-time wages and like go play golf. But then, that only lasts so long.
Right.
It really does. And then you start feeling empty and you searching for what the fuck am I doing here? And I feel like that's where the book leads you a lot to it.
Yep.
I like how you lay out a lot of the steps where you started. You talk about like a paradigm shift, which I've spoke about this a lot on the podcast because although I've known the word paradigm, just recently I've really truly understood of shifting your train of thought. I like in the book how you were referring to religion when you were growing up, your parents were taught you this way and you felt like something else was pulling you that way, and I feel like that goes across the board with everything you're taught. Obviously, and all the influences that people are dumping into your life and stuff that you think is all what other people think. And on my, the last 5 years, it's like, well, wait a minute, how do I truly feel about any of the topics? Parenting, schooling, fitness, nutrition, all this stuff. I've just been like reprogramming my brain to stuff that how I feel, and I think that's just a great way to start to, you mentioned it earlier in the book, which I say a ton of stuff, is think about what you're thinking about.
Yeah, which is one of the hardest things to do.
It's so hard.
There's this great book. One of the big books that really influenced me is a book called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. And that book was written in like 1911. And it's funny when you read that book because he didn't have the language or the technology or the way to what we now call quantum mechanics and manifesting and all that. He didn't have the verbiage.
Right.
But when you read it, you get it. But one of the things he says in there is a human being thinking and focusing on what's not going on around them, but the future place that they want to get to is one of the hardest things a human being can do.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So that whole, I remember when I was 34 when I heard think about what you're thinking about. And I remember going, the hell does that mean?
Yeah, what does that even mean? Yeah.
But then it's just one of those things you just keep ripping apart.
Sure.
And
yeah, I mean, once you start thinking about it, then you really start. Because, for me, I've been through so many ups and downs and roller coasters and emotionally. And eventually, I mean, at least for me, I woke up and I'm like, why the fuck am I thinking this way? Or why do I feel this way? Or why do I feel good or feel bad? And you start doing this inventory check. And then you realize what you're thinking about. You're picking your phone up in the morning, you're looking at Facebook, and you're getting an emotional tornado, whatever the case may be. You wake up and, whatever. So I think that's a very important lesson is to really, if you can really stop and think about why you're thinking about what you're thinking about, you can really start putting things into place,
one of the key concepts in the book is the idea of the poser, which I had learned from John Eldridge, who wrote Wild at Heart. And what I realized when I was writing the book is how much of a poser I really was, right? So if you ever want to really learn about yourself, teach, right, or write, because you know what's coming out of your mouth. You're like, you can bullshit everybody, but you can't yourself. You know underneath you're full of crap. You really do. You can tell yourself enough that you believe it, but I think you really kind of know inside. Come on, You're really weaning out here. You're just posing. And when you really get that, and there's levels of it, as you grow, I think what happens for us is that we're so influenced by everybody else and everything else. And today, it's worse than ever. So, it's also part of why I was talking to your generation, because Facebook especially is, it's just a sea of negativity, right? It's a sea. I recently lost a friendship that was for a lifetime because they just decided that was the platform they were going to air it out,
Express how they feel.
Crazy, So you really do have to think about, not only think about what you're thinking about, but are those thoughts yours?
Right. Yeah, that's important.
Right? Whose
Yeah.
thoughts am I really thinking? Am I listening to my spouse? Am I listening to my friends? You know, it's funny because it was the last chapter of the book, and the last chapter was like, oh man, I should probably put that in there, which is the power of your posse. And that's one of the most important chapters in the book.
Sure.
Because who you surround yourself with is how you're going to think, and how you think is what you're going to create.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It never, when I was younger, I never wanted to listen to my parents. Like, oh no, you shouldn't go play with, Stevie over there. He's not a good. No, I'm like, no, it's okay, it's okay. And 20 years later, like, yeah, I probably should have listened.
Yep. We all do it.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, at the beginning of the book, you also talk about the hamster wheel of life, and I really related that because I'm kind of still in the midst of that, and I know a lot of people probably are permanently in the midst of that. And what he refers to in the book on the hamster wheel, the hamster wheel of life, is you're so enamored with just responsibilities and duties and work and family throughout the day. I mean, you're not looking, but what are you doing just in the next hour? How can I do this to take care of that? And the time you get home, you're just gassed. You try to spend some time with the kids, and you put your head down, and then you wake back up to that good old hamster wheel and just start fucking running. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how important goal setting is, how important it is to just take a step out of that and look to the future to figure out what you're going to do. Maybe you could speak on
Sure.
what helped you do that.
So I have to give credit where credit is due, because that book really changed me. So in Wild at Heart, John Eldridge talks about a man is wired by God for three things: a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue, and an adventure to live. And my life was, and it's funny because I still can, all these years later, can feel that. You started talking about it, and my skin crawls. So it's Monday, our alarm goes off, right? And we go and we grind, right? And we come home, and we're really not present when we come home. I remember, and I get emotional talking about this all these years later, I remember coming home from teaching, and it would be 3 o'clock, and I didn't have to pick up my daughter from daycare until like 4 or 4:30, maybe even 5, probably 4:30. But I could have picked her up at 3. But I mentally couldn't handle it.
Sure.
And I would go home and nap just to get my brain right. And meanwhile, my daughter's sitting in somebody else's place, being raised by somebody else, and I just thought that was normal. You know what I mean?
It was okay.
You're just in self-preservation. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and as a high school music teacher, it's just grind. And so you're really not present most days of the week. Saturday comes, if you're off, you're with your family. God forbid, I lived in Connecticut, so then there's chores, raking the leaves, doing the lawn, snow, whatever, right? You're doing housework and all that stuff, and then Sunday, and then football and all that, and then 5 o'clock. It's crazy. I'm there.
You still feel it, yeah.
100%. That has never gone away.
Yeah.
At 5 o'clock, there is the sucker punch to the gut. And you're like, fuck, I got to get back. I have 4 hours. I'm going to go to sleep. Weekend's over. And I got to get back on that treadmill. I got to get back on that wheel for another 5 to 6 days.
Sure.
And year after year and after year. And what I found was when I read Battle to Fight, Beauty to Rescue, Adventure to Live, there was no battle. And men are checked out because society says there's no battle. We could spend hours on that one topic alone, because that one thing almost destroyed my marriage last year.
Wow.
That's how important a battle is for a man. He's got to have something he's fighting for, and it's not the alarm goes off and I get on the wheel. That's not the battle, right? If anything, that destroys the warrior. So the battle is huge. The beauty needs to be rescued, right? And she's got to respect the rescue. If she doesn't see the battle and doesn't see him as she's his beauty, there's problems in that relationship. And if you play that out over years, the marriage will fail.
Sure.
Right? But it's the adventure that's the key component. Because together, if in adversity, and really adversity brings the biggest adventure.
Sure.
Right? When things are good, we kind of sink into comfort, right? We get into a routine and things are awesome, but then what speaks to our soul is, man, I'm not living. I'm existing, but I'm not living. And then we will do things to shake it up because we crave that adventure. When my wife and I got on, first of all, starting a business together, raising 2 kids in the midst of starting a business in a place that we didn't know and knew no one, in an industry we knew nothing about, that's a hell of an adventure. Mm-hmm. But I would not take those low valley moments away because they shaped us and defined us. And in those low valley moments of life, that's where the real adventure lies, because how are we getting through this?
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I talk about it like God really, and I can't help talking about how we're created, because it has everything to do with what defines us. We are created to, so we're sitting at a table. If the edge of this table is the edge of our awareness and the edge of our reality, we're created to live on that edge, almost 1 foot over the abyss and 1 foot on what we know.
Sure.
Because that's where the real adventure lies. And that's where faith comes in, because if you can figure it out, you're still not living an adventure.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's that unknown, that excitement, that it, we all love those movies that are life or death. What's going to happen? How are they going to, so that wheel robs you're existing, you're not living.
Absolutely.
And real life is lived on the edge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so hard to get off. It really is. I mean, just, you almost have to realize that you're on it, which a lot of people don't even realize that. They don't even know that it's just, day in and day out, the same thing over and over. And I do feel like you hit it right on that the men need a battle, some sort of battle. And I kind of found that out, or an adventure, or just something to shake it up. And I kind of realized that when I went through my whole drug addiction rehab thing. It's like you're saying, life gets good and you're on cruise control and you're like, no, I just need a battle. I need to fix something. I need to be involved. So, in my younger age, I would just fuck shit up so I could try to rebuild it. Right. It's like, oh, life's too good. No, let's go fucking blah, blah, blah. Let's go do something to ruin this. And then we're on the adventure to rebuild it back up. And it's just the roller coaster of life, which I've heard so many stories of the same thing. And it comes back. You spoke a little bit about an addiction in the book, and how really you're able to get out of that is making a schedule and keeping yourself busy. And one of the guys that we both listen to, Grant Cardone, talks about that specifically, because he went through the same thing, through addiction. And the only way you have to be very precise on the time of your day. You can't, that's what he talks about. It's what you talk about. You have to have your day planned. If you have 2 hours to fuck off, you're gonna go beat your meat in the bathroom. You're gonna go smoke a bowl. You're gonna go, eat some Cheetos. Like, not everybody does that, but at a certain point, if you don't have a battle to face, or a girl to please, or a family to provide for, you might just be on that wheel for the rest of your life, man.
So let's dive into that a little bit, because it's funny. If I could go rewrite a section of the book, I would rewrite that section.
Really?
Yeah. What I found is I never had an addiction. So
you're a man.
I talk about,
you're a man.
No, listen. This is really this is, for me, this could be another book. I'm working on a book between husbands and wives. What happened for me was, we're going to really go down a rabbit hole here, but it's a good rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So the first thing is let's go back to, why are we? You said it's so hard to get off the hamster wheel, right?
Right.
And it actually isn't, if we look at why we're running in the first place. What we're chasing isn't real. So we chase these things that everybody tells us are real: house, car, pay, vacations, status. That's all bullshit,
sure.
Right? And I'm 50 now, so I can give that perspective. None of that stuff matters.
Yeah.
None of it matters. The love of your children, and the respect, and the people they become, the sanctity or the strength of your marriage, and the respect in that. The person, the 4 pillars, are you in business operating under those, right? Those are the things that really matter. And I believe if you really do adhere to those things, you'll always make money. You know what I mean? But we live in a townhome, and the townhome is perfectly fine for us, because what we want to do is go live.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't want to be burdened. And I used to in 2018, when I was writing the book, we were looking at buying a house. We would have been destroyed if we did that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's not about the house. It's about being able to live. So what are we chasing? And that's what I found early on, that was creating the wheel. So we create the wheel. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
get
yeah.
off anytime. You just got to be willing to let go of the things that you think are important.
Very true.
And then think about what you're thinking about, right?
Right.
But from the addiction, I put that I really did struggle with pornography from the moment I saw it till December of 2019. And so it's May 2020. So I found something to be so profoundly unbelievable that's where I want to write about next. But I didn't have an addiction, and if people have an addiction, something's missing,
Sure.
right? When men struggle with pornography, we're sexually repressed. And if a man can't express himself sexually, and he can't do it in his marriage, and there should be no barriers in marriage. The marriage bed was created, right, husband and wife. So what happens is and really what happened for us, and my wife would probably kill me for even going here, but we all enter into a relationship with hurts and hang-ups and barriers and agreements, and so we're not giving of ourselves. But what I have found is when we give of ourselves completely, man and woman, husband and wife, and you can't do this without being married, by the way, because you're never really giving all of yourself. You may have sex, but it's unfulfilled because there's a spiritual connection that happens when two people are married.
Right.
And what I found, I'll just skip to the end, is there was no addiction. It was repression.
Ah.
And I'll come out and say this. I have zero desire to look at porn.
Yeah.
There is zero attraction. You're talking about what I thought was an addiction for
Half your life.
Let's 30-something years.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll say this as well because we men do this, right? I haven't masturbated in 6 months
Wow.
because I don't need to.
Sure. You
Right?
don't have that craving like you thought you did.
I don't
Yeah.
because I have my wife and what's happening in our marriage, and unlocking her and how we are now. I call it the dance, and that'll be the name of the book. We are dancing in a way spiritually, emotionally, sexually, relationally. It's crazy what happens when we remove all those things that we're thinking about. To go
Right.
back to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's huge. You know, just a little bit that we've talked about with your marriage and me being, I'd still say recently married. 6 years. I mean, I think it's so very important with the communication. Like I mean, you can share a lot of experience, I'm sure, with this because you're 20 plus years married now.
June will be 23.
2 kids. You guys work together. You guys have done everything together. Maybe you can touch on how important it is to, like you brought up before, the battle that the guys might have. And sometimes I find myself doing this. I'll find my own battle and maybe not communicate that to my wife. Like, oh, I'm going to go run this race, or I'm going to do this podcast, or I'm going to not that I did that with these, but that's just an examples of what you could do and how that can start grinding with your guys' relationship. And then that just starts separating. So I think maybe you could touch on just the communication aspect of it, because I think it's the number one important thing, because I feel like any kind of hiccups I've had in my relationship, even it doesn't even have to be marriage, to be honest with you, communication just between humans is so freaking important, and I'm realizing that more day to day, because so many people just assume that you're mad or you're sad, and they just it never gets talked about, or it never gets you never connect. And so it's I enjoy talking with guys like you because we share the same thought process, or at least I'm getting into that arena, and it's always interesting to hear your part, especially me 20 years from now,
Right.
how you guys held it together.
So we didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't hold it together, and it almost destroyed us. And it's only because my wife and I, being in business, have done such ridiculous amounts of personal development and our faith, that saved our marriage. Anybody else would have ended. So I'm not here saying we've got a perfect marriage. I've walked through hell and back to stand at this point.
Was she open at the beginning to do that?
What, personal development?
Personal development.
It's great that you asked that. In the beginning, no.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it was a lot of me telling her, oh my gosh, you should read this or you should do this. I remember going to the Landmark Forum, and I came back, and it just destroyed our communication. I remember her yelling at me one time. She's like, look, I know I'm not as enlightened as you, like, and it was like, F you, buddy. I'm like, I'm not there,
Yeah.
But I think what happens is that if our spouses see us growing, husband or wife, right? If one's growing and the other's not, eventually the one who's not has got to say, well, if they say this is who I am, marriage over. It's just because you are literally making a decision.
You can't
to
change
stand still.
Right.
You can't change me.
Yeah.
And that's not life,
Yeah.
right? That when you stop growing, what do they say? If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
Right? Well, why is a relationship any different? If you're making a conscious decision to die, right? You're not going to grow. You're going to stay the same mentally person you are at 25, even though you're 40. How the hell does that work?
Sure.
Right? That's a choice that you're making.
Yeah.
So I think what Trish always did really, really well is she never let the gap between us get too big. Okay? And I'm really, really honored to talk about this. What happened for us is from 30s to last year, you're focused on the things that everybody tells you you're supposed to be focused on. Career, kids, you're living for your kids, you're living for your in-laws, your parents, you're just living for everybody, living for friends, all of it. So what happens is that you just get into this wheel that's mind-numbing, and you don't even realize you're really not thinking. You're trying to. You're taking the vacations, right? But they're really pauses. You get off the wheel. You spend 3 days. You get back on the wheel.
You got to run faster.
And you got to run. Right? And you're just kind of numb, and you just kind of accept that as the way it is.
Yeah.
What happened for us is that life eventually will squeeze you. So you don't see it in your 30s. It starts to show up in your 40s. But I can tell you that when your children become teenagers, especially later teens, the squeeze happens. And when the squeeze happens, whatever you're made of is coming out.
Yeah.
Okay? So what happened for us is oldest daughter goes off to college. That's a squeeze on a mother, right?
Sure.
We had some, just the running a business, getting older, your parents getting older. Okay, so eventually you get to a point where you're dealing with your children and your parents are like children.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And all of that squeezed at the same time. And all the things we neglected about our marriage and ourselves came out. And they call that midlife crisis.
Yeah.
But that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right? And it was Extreme, that which is a book that we both read and listened to, Extreme Ownership. I highly recommend that book.
Yep.
We both took extreme ownership. And it's funny because when you and I were we had that mastermind group.
Mm-hmm.
We did that on a Wednesday.
Right.
On Thursday was D-Day in my marriage.
Ugh.
I can tell you the day and the time.
Yeah.
And that day we made that decision. And everything opened up because it was extreme conversation. It was, I talk about one of the 4 pillars is authenticity. That's like, let it all out. Like, who are you? And what we struggled with was, I don't know if I know you anymore, and I don't even know if we're compatible anymore. And the scary thing is we were the whole time.
Yeah.
You just get caught in the waves of life. And my message to people now is, not only are the things in Man Up already, that we've got to, as men, man up. And it's not, man, suck it up. It's that the book is so not suck it up. I don't know how you don't do it, how you can do it without faith. Right. Because we're all dealing with it, right? I'm just older, but we're still, you know what I mean?
Sure.
All us men are created in this image. And there's things that are missing that we need each other to get. But then there's the whole female component that's in there as well. But if there's nothing higher, if we're left to ourselves, it's fucking disaster.
Yeah.
It's disaster.
For sure.
So it was, what do they say? If an airplane's off 1%, it'll end up,
halfway around the world.
Halfway around the world.
Right.
And that's what happened. That gulf got so big for us that the only way to survive it was to say, no, we start together right here. Yeah. We're not even going to try to understand how that gulf happened. Yeah. Let's just say we fucked up. Let's accept ownership of that. Let's get our shit together and move forward and lay some boundaries. But going back to schedule and things that I've learned that we all need. Number one, when we're children, you got to have a schedule. You got to know how the day's going to play out from the moment you wake up. Letting it happen randomly, or like Grant Cardone says, right? White space on your calendar is a recipe or is an invitation to the devil.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's true.
Yeah.
Right? So you gotta plan out the day. And so we started planning out our life, and then we would plan out the day, and some key components to making sure that communication stays together. And I had heard about this for years and just disregarded it. And that's what we call snuggle day.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So Thursday mornings are snuggle day for us.
Sure.
You know? So from the time we get up till about noon is our time.
Chilling. Yep.
Right? Turn everything off. You're checked into each other. You're checked out on everything else.
Sure.
You know, and obviously making sure the kids are taken care of.
Yeah.
Right? But ours are older now. We would do things like friends of ours taught this when we first got married, right? And it's sacred in our house. Though our kids know about it now, but not when they were little. But naked movie night. Right?
I like it.
Right? Naked movie night. I remember my friend Craig saying, it's naked movie night. I'm like, what? And that doesn't mean that anything sexual has to happen. It just means shut the door, put on a movie, get naked, and relax. You know what I mean? Like you're just with your with your spouse. So those kinds of things. And then what we did was we really committed to adventures. So we make sure that, the other thing that we do is every Friday morning we walk. And my wife has become my greatest, she's my greatest confidant. She is my counsel because we're active, one. We're walking, we're talking, we're sharing, and the engagement back and forth. Friday mornings are sacred for us. We do it at 6:30 in the morning, so the sun's coming up.
Sure.
Right? So you're just starting the day, and you're with that person who's supposed to know you best.
Right.
Right? And the wisdom that I've gotten from her on those walks didn't exist. I didn't listen to it as a man.
Right.
For 20-something years. You're just like, whatever, that's you just, da-da-da. But they're always right. They are always right,
Yeah.
right? Whether we like
one way or the other, yeah.
they are always, I am officially going on record, they are always right. But, setting that time aside to be together, to communicate, and to accept each other. Not only to accept each other as who we are, but to communicate and listen to your spouse. Your spouse knows you best, right? They're laying next to you, right? So when we're checked out sleeping, right, she hears me snore. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
During I'll share this, during the quarantine, the hair gets long, and I'm like, Trish, you gotta learn how to cut hair. Like, how hard could it be?
Yeah.
Right? It's just a razor. So I'm sitting there, Alex, and I'm the mirror's here, and I'm looking in the mirror. I got freaking hair all over me, right? There's hair all over her, and she's like shaving, the back of my neck and my shoulders,
Right.
And I'm like, who would do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, who else is gonna freaking shave my neck?
Yep.
So you just kind of realize that no, this is my partner.
Yeah.
I've got to, and I'll share this because again, it's something I'll speak about or write about. I've learned to put things through 4 filters. And so if there's the 4 pillars in the book, there's, for men, I think, the 4 filters that we should see the world through. So anytime somebody comes to me with anything, I've learned to pass them through filter number 1, which is it good for my soul and my spirit? Is it good for me? Is it good for my relationship with God? Is it good for me? Number 2, is this good for my marriage? Right? So is it good for me? Is it good for my marriage? 3, is it good for my family, my wife and my children? Is it good for just what's going on in our home? And 4, is it good for my business? And if the answer is no to any of those 4, I'm out.
Not doing it, yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And it really kind of puts things in its place.
It helps, yeah.
You don't realize how many things we do that are not going through those filters.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm definitely guilty of that for sure because, with all the racing and all the crazy shit that I've been doing, sometimes, I try to run it. I don't have filters specifically like that, but I can very well relate to, wait a minute, is this really going to be the best decision for X, Y, and Z for me, for the family, for the kids, for the business? You kind of run that through. But I can I can deeply relate when you're talking about when you and your wife got into the self-improvement journey and how you would come back from these events, be so ecstatic and be talking about it and be revved up, and we're going to be doing this, we're going to be changing, baby, we're going to do it. And she's just like, look, settle the fuck down. Like, I didn't have the same upbringing, and I can really relate to that because I'm coming up through the same thing. And I've really realized that I've almost similar to the filters, I've got to kind of step outside myself, because for the longest I would come home and I would just spew all this information that I'm learning for me, for my personal self, and expect for my wife to also just, oh, she's going to love this. And
Right.
she kind of said the same thing to me, like, look, like, I'm not on your page. I'm not, it's just not for me. And it really made me reflect on everybody's different. Like I've been through a whirlwind of my own stupid shit, and when I was growing up, and not everybody's the same. So for me, I kind of needed this, dive deep into my soul, and maybe she's not as well, but I do feel that the communication part is very important because we've had to sit down and talk about it. It's because it's came to the point where it's so heavy on me that because I enjoy it, I'm passionate. That's why I started this podcast. That's why I'm trying to just help other people, but we had to get on the same page, and I feel like it's very crucial to speak with your wife about that, and to not let that sea grow, like you're saying, of where you're just doing your things, and then like you're saying, 20 years later, it's just gonna pop open because you're not really discussing any of this, and it's a journey, man. It's such a journey. Huh?
It is. It is. It's I think what we need as men, and this is the hard thing. In my business, I do a lot of hiring, training, mentoring people. And women really do open up and talk more than men. So it's really easy for me if I'm training a female to find out what makes her tick. It happens really fast. Guys, we don't talk about it. You know what I mean? We kind of keep it because it's that whole poser, man, I don't know if I want, man, am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be liked by what's really going on inside of me? But when we develop those relationships where we have guys around us that we can be real, that we can be transparent, that we can say, man, I'm scared, or, I'm fired up about this. I want to go take the mountain, right? Like when we have that around us, we don't go to our wives with a lot of that because they're just not there. They're dealing with their own stuff, right? So we have to have those male relationships, that circle of guys, to take the guy stuff to.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
The recipe for disaster is to take the guy stuff to the woman, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Right.
Right? Because we're never going to get the response that we're looking for. We're looking for a response the way we hear it, see it, want it.
Sure.
Right? And they just don't get it because it's not how they work.
Yeah.
Right? So it's so important to have that circle of guys. But then there are things that we can only go to our wives with, right? And it's not validation. That is a key thing. Can't go to a female and get masculine validation. Can't have it. That's a John Eldridge thing. Right?
Yeah.
But the thing that I love is that interaction between husband and wife, where, first of all, if we stop talking as men and start doing, it'll solve a lot of problems.
Sure.
In my business, when people are like, the business isn't working, my wife's not supporting me, I'm like, when was the last time you brought a check home? You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
The one thing I did to prove to my wife that I was serious was I brought home checks.
Yeah.
Right? We were winning things because I was working.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, bring home a damn check.
Yeah.
Man up. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, stop talking about it and fucking go do it.
Right.
So that solves a lot of problems. But what happens is we could be doing all those things and then still fall off because the key component to husband and wife and male and female is we want to rescue the beauty, right? But we need the beauty to see the rescue. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Right? The crazy thing is that when she does, we fight harder for her.
Sure.
And then that says to her, I'm safe, he loves me, he sees me, and we pull her out. We pull out her heart. And that's what I'm talking about in the dance.
Right.
What so often happens is between husband and wife, male, female, we're trying to get something from our spouses that one we got to get from ourselves and we got to get, through our relationship with God. And we ask others to validate us and to fill these holes that they can't do. And when they don't, when they ultimately fail, because they can never do that, we blame them.
Sure.
And then that sends everything all over the place.
Well, I like how you talk in the book. You talk about how you word it in the book is how men are created in God's eyes, not women's eyes, and how men will often ask the wife or the girlfriend or the female in their life almost permission,
Right.
or if they can do something. And so many of us, the wife will say no, or it's not good for us, and okay, it gives us an excuse, gives us a way out. And I've definitely been guilty of that before. And when I read it, I'm like, it makes perfect sense. It's what I've told my wife since I've started all this. I feel like almost there's like a calling, like which you talk about a ton of times. I want to help people, I want to give back, I want to be a part of the community, I want to do all these things, and to I just had the biggest brain fart ever.
It happens.
I was so much in wanting to do all the getting the permission from. So like I was saying, for the calling, if I have something greater than her voice or from my voice, something inside of me is pulling me to do something. But if I'm going to ask another person if that's okay and accept that it's not because that's the way they feel, I feel like that's defeated, man. It really. It's the opposite of manning up already. It's really you're finding an excuse to hide behind.
Right.
And I like how you put it, how it's, a lot of people, religious or not, or in God's eyes or not, but I feel like, if you're on that journey and you're searching for something, that calling or whatever you have inside, I like how you put it where, you don't ask for validation from other people or from your wife if it's okay, assuming it's, in good means for it, that you're doing it for. I feel like that hit home a lot because it's, man up and just fucking do what you feel like you should do. Obviously have them in the communication, have them part of the process. But I that was big. I like that one.
When I did the Tough Mudder last year, and then all hell broke loose in my life. But I remember doing it, and it was, I knew I was going to complete it no matter what. Right, like I thought I was going to die.
I remember.
And I have long-term.
You still have knee damage.
Have knee damage from that. But I remember finishing that, and for me, that was this part of you is done. What are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, what are you trying to prove? And it, for me, was that lack of, at some point, and I've never said this, I'm going to say it here. At some point, we have to answer our own question. And what I mean by that is, men are always plagued with the question, do I have what it takes? It's why we do the crazy shit that we do.
Sure.
Right? And we kind of have to have that pushing the envelope, sense of danger, adventure, all that. But if we're doing it for validation, at some point we got to answer our own question. You know what I mean? And so doing the Tough Mudder, had shut the door on, yeah, dude, you just did that at, soon to be 50 with a bunch of young 30 people your age, and you did it on the advanced level. What more do you really need to prove?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So for me, it was like, all right, I'm done with pushing the envelope physically.
Sure.
But then it became, now for me, is I'm pushing the envelope spiritually, right? I've learned that I'm not chasing success, I'm chasing significance. What does my life mean? And now my time is really kind of directed in that. So there's stages of these things. But in the end, you got to answer your own question. And if you're, why do we get addicted to the things that we get addicted to and all that? Because we can't answer that question. You know what I mean? And I found a mentor, the importance of mentors and how, they're so important. And he helped me figure out that the person running my question was my 8-year-old self.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
So
So I was listening to my 8-year-old self and my 13-year-old self, and I know who they were at the time, and that was running me at 50.
Sure.
Right? So, but going back to, because we just went on a tangent, the whole permission thing, women want to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, very much.
Right? But they're not, right? If we go to them for permission, it emasculates us, right? We cop out, and that, whatever that was, if, hey, honey, I want to know whatever, right? And we accept that. And I'm not saying defiantly do that with your, but
Exactly. Yeah.
right, if they're important, bring them up, right? If there are things that you got to talk about, there are things in your soul. The most terrible thing is a man believing that he cannot reveal his soul. He will self-destruct and destroy everything around him while he does.
Sure.
Okay? But when we do, it's not a permission thing. It's an open discussion. I'm speaking to you because I value what you have to say, and there are things that I need to look at, right? And there's that give and take. But when we ask for permission and the answer is no, and even if the answer is yes, right? Because we can get a yes and we don't have our full support. Think about that.
True.
Right? That's where discussion comes in. But if we put it in a permission thing, honey, can I have my balls this weekend? You know what I mean?
Right.
Right? You're doomed.
Yeah.
You're just doomed.
You're never getting them.
You never get. Not only are you never getting them, you're never holding them.
True.
You know what I mean? Like you don't give. I say, man, I'm not giving my balls to anybody.
Yeah.
You know, they're mine.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I will lovingly let you borrow them. You know.
Yeah, for sure.
But those are things that destroy men, and then we kind of seek the answers that we are looking for somewhere else, never in the places that we need to get them, which one is inside.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely important for them to be a part of the conversation. Well, it's interesting for me that on this, a lot of the podcasts we listen to, a lot of these guys, they have, or just in general, a lot of people that I've talked to have either standards or words they live by, or 4 pillars, as you would put it. What did you come up with those 4 pillars for the book? You started kind of brainstorming and you felt like those fit your life, or did you have those prior to it?
No, it came out in the book.
It did, okay.
It was, what are the things that hold true for me? Mm-hmm. And what I've been trying to stand on my whole life, and that's where they came. Integrity is a big thing with me. Compromise your integrity, and I've been. Don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I've compromised my integrity.
Sure.
But it is the one thing that you own. You're born with it. You own it. You know what I mean? It's built. It's wired into you, and you know when you're compromising it. And that's why I wrote that as number 1. Integrity is just, you got to do what you say you're going to do. And I think that right there in our society today that's being lost. If you say you're going to do it, deliver. You know what I mean? Don't say you're going to do something and then don't deliver, because when you're out of integrity, you're never looked at the same way again.
No.
Right?
No, you really aren't. No.
You can't build anything, right? And don't get me wrong, we all fail. A lot of the book, he's my favorite character in the Bible, is David. David, God said, was a man after his own heart, yet he was a murderer and an adulterer.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a big statement. We kind of gloss over the fact that this guy was far from perfect. But integrity is, when you screw up, admit it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I screwed up. It's real. Let me get back and onto that pillar and stand on it and learn the lesson that you've learned. So, the 4 pillars were things that I've kind of, tried to stand on and have built a life that I am proud of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the key.
Yeah.
If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, and this is the challenge for everybody listening, if you knew it's 2:30 today, right, Eastern time, if you knew that tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock you were not going to wake up, if you knew that, are you proud of your life?
Yeah.
And if not, what the fuck are you doing about that? That's the entire man up already mind.
Yeah, for
You know
sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Because it could be over like that.
Absolutely. That's kind of why I brought it up, is because when I hear, you have the 4 pillars, other people have what fits their life, like you're saying. So for me, I think about that a lot, especially with kids now. It's like, if I weren't here tomorrow, what can my kids look at that their father stood by? What was his values in his life that were important? How did he live? Was integrity a part of it? Was honesty? Was all and those things are always thrown around as kids, be honest, be nice to people, just the regular human interaction. But I feel like it's very powerful to have like 4 pillars or whatever describes your life, to have that broken down. So I have a journal in the car, and when I think of something good or I hear something good, I'll kind of piece it together myself, because I feel like it's very important. I feel like it's a good foundation, especially starting with kids, to be able to tell them and to teach them about these words and integrity and honesty and how to really live your life that way. I saw you had the 4 pillars in there. That's why I brought it up, because
Yeah.
it leads back to what we all think about, especially if you have kids, is our legacy. What are we going to leave behind? What are they going to learn? What now that we have podcasts, which is amazing, now they can listen to what we got to say, so
Right.
it's
Right.
great. But I really like to be able to put those values on a paper, and almost have like a family crest of what your family. The Puritz are these 4 pillars hold the Puritz response. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I
Yep.
feel like that's a good
Yeah.
shit.
And thank you. Yeah, we've literally, a lot of that came out of how I was raised.
Yeah.
And then how we raised our kids, have integrity, be humble. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's when and a lot of this was what social does to erode those things. It's not about you,
Yeah.
and I've learned the hard way. It ain't, man, when you think it's about you, you're on, it's, you know what I mean? It's a
You already lost.
slippery slope.
Yeah.
Then there's the morality, and morality it's a tricky one. What's no big deal to somebody else for somebody is a big deal. But I think we know, there's a code of ethics kind of wired in. When you're crossing the morality line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it might vary from person to person on how you were raised, but I think ultimately, when it gets to the important things, like you discuss in the book, like there's something in here that's kind of steering us the right way.
Right.
Yeah.
You bet.
Like don't kill that person.
You got it. Right.
Well, just to come back, we were talking about it at the beginning. Is where was I at? So you were talking about at the beginning, or in the book, I should say, that you're always kind of chasing this, because when you get this, you're going to be that, and when you get that, then it's going to put me in this position. Maybe you can touch on that, because I feel like I was so wrapped up into that for so many years, and you kind of talked, backdoored it when you talk about, the money and the house and the cars and this. And now you can really express how it doesn't mean shit, being at 50
Right.
years old. And that kind of crossed my path when I was 30, because all through my 20s, I'm like, let me just get to make 6 figures. If I can get, even when I was 18, when I was in, like, that was my number, $100,000 a year, I'm set. I'm going to be chilling. Fuck, was I wrong, man. God, and, you just, so yeah, long story short is none of that shit is really going to mean anything. So maybe you can touch on, so many people think like, I'm going to get this raise and then I'm going to be a better boss, or I'm going
Yep.
to, get this job and I'm going to be productive and I'm going to show up on time. Maybe talk about the hamster wheel of that.
So I remember learning that for the first time, it was how most people operate, how we're conditioned, is if I have this, then I'll do this, and then I'll be this, right?
Yep.
Is that what you're? That's
Exactly
correct,
what
right?
that. Yep.
If I have if I had a better job, then I would, be a better, or I would do whatever, and then I would be, right?
Yep.
Have, do, be.
Yep.
And it's really be, do, have. When you become what you most want, you will act like that and then have that. So the example I'll use is when I came into our business, I knew I was going to be a vice president. Even when I signed the application, I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I wasn't signing it to not be it. Right?
Right.
There never was there were often times I'm like, man, am I ever going to get there? But deep down, I was like, you're going to have to kill me before I don't. It was like one of those things. And so I acted like one. I showed up to everything. I worked like one. I would befriend guys that were 10 years, 15, 20 years in the business I was making nothing. I was making $10,000, $20,000. They're making millions, and I was friending them because I was going to be one of them. So I just became that person, and acted like it. And because I acted like it, I eventually became it.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
You know, so it's that concept that you have to become that which you want in mind and heart first. And you can't do it just in mind. If your heart's not in it, you know, your heart will call bullshit on your brain.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
Head and heart have to be in alignment. You have to really, really be it. You have to believe it emotionally. Right. But when you emotionally connect with that which you most want, you start acting like that. And when you act like it, you manifest, you'll have what you need. Everybody thinks my God, you know, and I was one of them. If I just had, you know, if I had a better job, if I had a better car, if I had a better marriage, if I had more money, if, you know, I would be happy if, you know, oh my gosh, Corona. If. You know, I heard, and I talked about it on a ride along, that I read this in a book by John Eldridge, that how you react to canceled flights has everything to do with what happens next.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh my gosh, if I just had a better, you know, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
No shit happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
You're still going to get to your destination, or you just got to believe. You've got to become that which you most want.
Sure. That kind of touches on the probably maybe the last thing that we were going to talk about, you talk about in the book, is about your subconscious. How what you're saying to yourself, basically what you're explaining, is what your subconsciously is going to make happen. So if you're, you know, if you were to start this company and say, I'm going to be that guy, but then you go in your car and you're like, I don't think I can do that. Like, it's just not fucking me. Then that's, your subconscious is picking up on what you truly want. Like you're saying, if you can really put yourself into, like you were just explaining how you did with this career, you can really put yourself in that position. There's that subconscious that's going to back you up. But if you have any of that bullshit in your mind, not connected to it, it's just not going to happen. And a lot of people don't realize how important, like, the subconscious just really kicks in. It just, you'll catch yourself doing shit. And like, why in the fuck am I doing this? And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I was talking about this, and then it kind of led me here. You're just on zombie mode to going through it, and you're like, and then you stop yourself. You're like, what the fuck? Yeah. It's so important.
Yeah,
really.
You have to really emotionally connect to what I can't stress it enough how important it is to be emotionally connected with what you want. And the scary thing is the subconscious will deliver whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's the scary part, yeah.
That is the scary part, which is why goals are so important. And why goals as a couple are so important, because that's what you're both running to. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, you know, Trish and I now have set goals on these. Like, we literally made a list. These are the things that we're going to do this year. Now, here's a crazy thing. I've been hearing that for 15 years.
I know.
And you put the list off, and you put the list off. We know what we want.
Yeah.
Bullshit. You have to write it down.
Sure.
And so, you know, now you can, you know, hack your life. You know, we all walk around with a phone. Well, we both share, we have iPhones, we share the Note app, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So we just make a note that we share between the two of us, and every time one of us puts something on there, you know, it notifies us, and we look at it, and where are we on the list? And we've checked off so many things in the last 5 months that we've put off for years,
cool.
like 10 years,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just because we're emotionally connected to these things. And my plea to everybody is, man, don't wait until you lose it all or almost lose it all to wake up to your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So many people do that.
You bet. You're going to get what you most are emotionally connected to. So if you're connected to fear, you're going to have a scary life.
Yeah.
You know, if it's worry, if it's doubt, if it's whatever, man, that's what you're getting. You know, the universe is an incredible genie.
Sure.
Right? It just grants what you want. It really does.
Well, I think that's super important when you either to write out your goals or just to talk about it. Because have you ever thought that you wanted something or was a goal and you said it out loud and you're like, no, maybe that's not really what I was feeling. Like, right. And you don't realize that until you either put it on paper, you make a goal with your partner to do it, or you just verbally say it. Because there's been times like that, like you're saying, like, oh, maybe I want something better, or I want something this, but then you start talking about it and you're like, no, that's really not. It was up here. I was playing a movie up here, how it was going to be, and that's not fucking life, you know?
Right. The scary thing is that when you're setting goals that are not your own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're somebody else's.
True.
Somebody else's. Scary thing is when you set goals that are somebody else's idea of what your life goal should be.
It's a nightmare.
That's why I say you can't theorize. You know what I mean? You
Right.
can't just intellectually. They have to be emotional.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole fourth pillar, or one of the pillars, is authenticity.
Yeah.
Man, be real. Who are you? And it's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's the thing. It's okay.
It's okay to be you.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to get that across. Awesome, John. Well, I appreciate it, man. We're going to wrap it up here. Anything that you could suggest to my generation, younger guys, kids, teenagers, something to help them man up today? Would that be goal setting? That would be talking to a close friend about what they want? Would that be taking a daily inventory of what they're thinking about? What's something that you could maybe suggest for somebody that's just like, I'm stuck right now?
Don't be afraid. So don't hide. Don't hide. And we do a really good job of that. Don't hide anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Go find somebody who's farther along the path, whether it's in age or experience, and make sure they're somebody that you respect and you would want to be where they are at. And the funny thing is that what we do is we say, well, who am I? I call it the Moses response, right? Moses was like, who am I, God? Like, why do you want to send me? Right? We do that really well. Who am I?
Yeah.
But what you'll find is that when somebody has walked the adversity path, they recognize somebody who's asking questions and are very eager to share what they've learned to ease the pain of that walk.
Ah, very true. Yeah. Yeah.
So don't hide. Go find that mentor. Pursue mentors. It's the one thing I'm very proud of that I did, was I pursued the people that I wanted to learn from.
Yeah, it's super important.
Yeah.
That's what led me to you.
I appreciate that. I'm very humbled by that.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, how can people find you? Where can they get the book? Where can they find your podcast and find out more information about you?
Oh, I appreciate that. So I'm on LinkedIn as John Puritz, Instagram, J Puritz. I have a Facebook business page, John Puritz. It'll say, Man Up Already podcast. The podcast, which is the Man Up Already podcast. On Amazon, the book is on there. But also manupalready.com. If you shoot me an email, we can correspond and I can get you a book. I'll sign it and get it out to you. And those are probably the best places.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, John. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming and talking about your experience. Guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our page at elevatedlifestylelab.com and share with any of your friends that feel like they could use a Man Up Already shout out. See you later, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, man.